Hello, this is the latest of my videos on Alistair Parker's book, The Second World War, this one dealing with the Eastern Front from Stalingrad to Kursk in 1943. It comes from chapter 7 on the end of German expansion, the Atlantic, North Africa and Russia. So in the previous video we talked about the way in which the German army had made massive advances across the southern part of the Soviet Union in 1942, reaching the river Volga at Stalingrad and starting to advance into the Caucasus also. However, this advance had certain underlying weaknesses in terms of essentially overextension. And the Soviets in 1943 were able to fight back effectively. The Soviet Supreme Command concentrated a growing force against the German 6th Army and 4th Panzer Army at Stalingrad. A continuous and ferocious battle was fought there for almost 3 months. In street fighting, the Germans lost most of the benefits of superior tactical skill and organization, which they normally had. Slowly and agonizingly, the 6th German Army cleared the town, street by street, house by house. The long westward flank from Stalingrad was guarded by Italian and Romanian troops. Originally, it was intended that this supporting role would be performed by German divisions, but these were drawn into the battle for Stalingrad itself. As the risks of holding such a weakly held salient became clearer, and Hitler still refused to allow any strategic withdrawal, insisting that all the ground gained in 1942 must be held as a starting point for the 1943 campaign, the Romanians and Italians were brought in with under-strength German units to strengthen them. On the 19th of November, after a prolonged artillery barrage, the Soviets began a massive pincer attack north and south of Stalingrad with over 500 tanks, many of them being the T-34s. By the 23rd of November, over 200,000 Germans in Stalingrad had been cut off from the rest of the German army. Hitler rejected the idea of the 6th Army attempting an immediate breakout, relying instead on resupply by air until a relief force could break through. This never happened, and after weeks of hardship and savage combat, Paulus finally ordered surrender on the 1st of February 1943. Most of the 100,000 Germans taken prisoner were never able to return to Germany. This is Field Marshal Paulus, the commander of the German 6th Army at Stalingrad, and later a Soviet prisoner and anti-Hitlerite German officer. The beleaguered German 6th Army at Stalingrad was evidently doomed, but their continued resistance saved the other German army in the Caucasus from being cut off straight away by a Soviet attack on Rostov. The Germans, however, were never able to threaten Soviet oil supplies again. With reinforcements rushed from the west, General Manstein was able to threaten Soviet communications and to re-establish a solid German defense line in the south, close to that that had existed in early 1942. Although there would still be one more major German offensive in the east, the German invasion of the Soviet Union had essentially reached its limit in the autumn of 1942. Stalin and the USSR would survive, and the Germans would never obtain their essential goals of control over the Caucasus oil fields and the Donetsk industrial basin. Although Soviet forces outnumbered the Germans by the summer of 1942, there were perhaps 3 or 3.5 million Soviet troops compared to 2.6 million German. That was not what contained the German advance. Rather, it was an improvement in the quality and equipment of the Soviet troops and it was well trained and well equipped forces which made the difference. There were various factors here. Firstly, from late 1941, Special Guards units had been selected and given priority in manpower and equipment. Although much of the Soviet Union's traditional industrial area had been put out of action, this only led to a temporary halt in the growth of war production. For example, in the second half of 1942, almost twice as many T-34 tanks were produced as in the first half. That's over 8,000 compared to over 4,000. Thirdly, better Soviet communications enabled lateral support so that crucial sectors could be reinforced by drawing on others. By contrast, German communications were now becoming inadequate. Fourthly, improved organization increased Soviet mobility, though there were still some disorderly retreats in the summer of 1942. Fifthly, there were increasing supplies of lorries from the Western Allies. For example, in July 1942, the Americans sent the Soviets over 35,000 trucks and 6,000 jeeps. Then also we should note that German losses of men on the southern part of their eastern front could not be replaced even before the surrender at Stalingrad. By November 42, the Soviets already outnumbered the Germans 3-1 in the south. The Romanians, Hungarians, and Italians, who were the German allies, were not an adequate substitute. After Stalingrad, there was no chance that a third great German offensive could win the war in the east. Germany was now on the strategic defensive, and Hitler could only hope to divide the Allies. Stalin had to be forced to compromise by the extent of German destruction. In February 1943, Manstein suggested that the Germans established a flexible defense and wait for a Soviet attack, which could then be destroyed, using German superiority in mobility, organization, and tactics in fluid battles. But Hitler preferred another great offensive, and a great envelopment was then planned around a large Soviet concentration of forces in the Kursk salient. The offensive was delayed to allow the construction of more new model tanks and self-propelled guns. That's the Panzer and Tiger and the Ferdinand gun. The Soviets had good intelligence, however, some from the British, regarding German strength and intentions, and carefully constructed defences in great depth. Both sides built up their numbers and their equipment. The German attacks began on the 4th and 5th of July 1943 in the south and north of the salient, respectively. They employed 600,000 troops against 1.3 million Soviets in that sector. The Soviets had more tanks and aircraft than the Germans, and their quality had greatly improved. Sturdy American trucks gave the Soviets greater mobility and flexibility. By the time of the Kursk battles, the Soviets had received well over 100,000 Western trucks. Germany, by contrast, was only able to produce 82,000 trucks in 1943. The German encirclement failed. The pincers never closed. Rather than annihilation, it was large-scale mutual attrition. Then, following the Anglo-American landings in Sicily on the 10th of July 1943, on the 13th of July, Hitler ordered that the offensive should be ended and several top-quality divisions be moved to meet the new threat in the west. Hitler feared that the Italians might soon abandon the war, exposing both Italy and, worse from the German perspective, the Balkans to attack by the Western Allies. By then, the struggle at Kursk had already been decided, and the last German major assault in the east had failed. At the time of Kursk, there were 2.5 times as many troops in the east as in the West, most of the troops in the West being of lower quality or having a rest period from the East. So that finishes this chapter. Thank you very much for listening up to this point, and particular thanks to my patrons for their kind support and encouragement, without whom I wouldn't be able to make these videos. You're very welcome to support my channel if you will. Like, comment and share on the videos. Subscribe if you want to be notified of future videos. I'll give Patreon and, for the moment, PayPal links below if you want to provide practical support. Next week we'll move on to a new chapter on Anglo-American strategies for victory. Have a good day.